You see the tube through which the air was pumped. These bits of material on the back of the case are slag, slices of the slag from the throwaway. The upper photograph shows a ceramic center, brick factory, such as would have made the furnaces, and that brick over there. The bottom, this whole little mountain, is all slag with a thin veneer of sand. These objects belong to our collection. They come from original research done in that area in the 40s and early 50s by Dr. Hans Guggenheim, who still lives here in the South End, and who was generous in making these materials part of our collection. Now, if you let me in front of you, and you come into the room where I am, on the side where I am, fill in just here a little bit. This room recreates with great accuracy the third room of the burial chamber. When you came down that stair, the first room you would have come into was the food storage. The second room was the treasury. The third room, the burial chamber. If you look overhead, the ceiling is barrel vaulted and painted to resemble the sky, with 5-point stars in earth red and yellow, readable on the band going across or the diagonal stretching down. The walls are completely hand-carved and polychromed and are fully readable. There are 4 chapters from the Book of the Dead that are hymns and prayers for the resurrection of the King. Each wall has a pair of small doors like this. In the original tomb, this went back about 6 to 8 feet in the rock and ended. We don't know for certain what these were used for. If you come nearer, you come to the first of the illustrations. This too is carved and painted. You see Aspelta on his lion-shaped funeral bed. Above him is the sun disk, the main symbol of the old religion. His face is connected to the sun disk by a ray, and the meaning of this scene is the morning, the beginning of the day. Now, if I can get you against this wall so that you can see more easily the giant box at the middle of the room. The giant box at the middle of the room is the sarcophagus. A sarcophagus is a container for the coffin. On each corner, you will see the eye of the god horse. So he can see anyone coming towards this sarcophagus from the cardinal directions of north, south, east, and west. Along the entire side is more text, more hymns and prayers, and along the very bottom of the divinities, a frieze of the gods. When you step back and look at the very center on the top, you'll see the seated hawk, representing the god horse. And further back, you'll see the seated dog or jackal, representing Anubis. Anubis, in this context, is a guardian of burial spaces, but he is also noted as one of the participants in the weighing of the soul in the judgment. So come to this end of the room. At this end of the room, we have a great false doorway. Now, from time to time, you will see one of these closed shapes. This is called a cartouche. It's always the name of whose burial space you're in. At the center is this largest of doors. This is the door through which the king left his tomb when he resurrected each morning. In the scene above, we see Osiris sitting on his throne, holding the crook and the flail. The crook comes down to us in the bishop's crozier and the story of the Good Shepherd. The flail is still carried by traditional kings in much of Africa. Behind him is his sister and wife Isis. She holds the symbol of life, the Ankh, sometimes called the Egyptian cross, in one hand, and this chair-like shape on her head represents their son, the god Horus. In front is an offering table, and the newly deceased Aspelta is coming to present himself to Osiris now that he is in the underworld. Now, if I can get you against the back wall. At the rear of the sarcophagus, the charming detail of the tail of Anubis dividing the pediment of the upper lid. On each side, you will see Anubis on his throne couch, very elegantly displayed there. Farther down, you'll see the kneeling Isis, almost worn away in front of her, her husband and brother Osiris, and on her head, the symbol of Horus. Now around to this side. Here we recreated the great outer coffin. King Aspelta's original mummy and his original coffin were stolen in ancient times when his grave was partially robbed. They don't exist anywhere in the world that we know of. This coffin is based on a coffin from the 25th dynasty in the collection of the Museum of Fine Arts, different in one important way, which is IMFA has no 25th dynasty coffin that's gilded, but we do know that they were sometimes gilded. Inside of this coffin would have been one, possibly more, wooden coffin, and in the innermost of the wooden coffins would have been the mummy, wrapped in linen, the body covered with a netting with semi-precious stones, a gold face mask, and gold for the fingertips. It was for the gold that these places were robbed when the empire passed away and there were no longer protectors at the burial sites. Now, if you step nearer the coffin and look on the back side, you will see a bird with the human head. The bird with the human head is called a ba. It represents the soul. It's descending to his body, again seen on the lion-shaped funeral bed. At the end of each day, he returned to the underworld. So the meaning of this scene is the evening. Now come to this end of the room for the finale. If I can get you right along the front of the sarcophagus and direct your attention to high up at the back of the tomb. The whole purpose of this elaborate burial was to assure the daily resurrection of the king, because by that resurrection, he brought light to earth. And it was already realized that all of the energy of life on earth comes from the sun. So he brought the gift of continuing life. He also perpetually recreated time, because time doesn't exist unless you measure it, and the oldest measure of time is the cycle of day and night, from which we reckon the day, the week, the month, the year. So let's participate with him here. Here is the sun's boat. There's the sun, the main passenger. Here are the sacred lotus blossoms. There are the oars. And here is the Aspelta riding along on the back. How does this cycle play out? Here we see Aspelta in the morning, walking by the sun and its beam. And he ascends to the midday sky, and we see him here at the highest point in the boat of the sun. Then we see him walking in the evening by the moon on the other side. And then he disappears to the underworld, and the next morning rises again. And that cycle of light and darkness is the cycle that becomes the story of resurrection. It is the cycle of the marker of time. Day, night, day, night. So that's the gist of this story. Now, I told you that we sometimes get asked about why we did this. This recreation of the sarcophagus alone cost me more than $17,000 to cast in polymer from the original. So this was a sizable undertaking. And I say it because we say to young people all the time, you come from greatness. And the logical question is, where's the evidence? And museums are in the business of evidence. We're in the business of presenting the actual things that were players in the story. So we picked a story that had enough information in Boston that we could be confident of the telling of it. And that is the purpose that we tried to meet in the creation of this exhibition. Now, I had 3 other pieces to this exhibition that I never got done. And I hope to get them done when we move to our new space in the relatively near future. One thing was, I had the idea that when the space was exquisitely quiet, you might hear an oud playing in the distance. And then I thought, well, that may be a little corny. And then I thought, well, maybe not. And then I thought, wouldn't it be great to do a series of programs on the lutes of the Nile, the string instruments of the Nile? And you could start up in the central highlands in Uganda, Burundi, with the ancient kinds of zithers as court instruments. And then you could come down to Ethiopia and you could have what's often called the harp of David, that particular kind of lyre-like harp. And then when you get to Sudan, you have the Sudanese oud, and then you in Egypt, and you have the Egyptian oud, and then you get to the Mediterranean, and you have the Grecian lyre, and you would have this wonderful story of music. So I thought that would be great to have with this. Then we had this guy who was an architect, and you know, architects do these magical things with CAD, where they create spaces that don't